Howdy, folks. My wife and I did a lot of hiking this late summer and early fall. And while we're out, I did some wildflower sketching. You always think of the spring as being very lush with flowers and in the meadows and everything, but there were still a surprising number of flowers that time of year. Now, these sketches are not meant to be works of art. They were done in the field. They're meant to be more informational and for identification. So when I got home, I could look through different guidebooks or references and figure out exactly what it was. The sketches are relatively crude, and they're done with pencil and colored pencil. So the range of colors is definitely limited because I was carrying a very few pencils. And a couple were done in watercolor, but mostly in colored pencil. So let's take a look to see what we have. This plant I found in kind of a humid area of the deep woods near a creek, kind of in a ravine. And what was interesting is all the flowers were pointed downwards. So most of them you see kind of from the side. The one towards the bottom, you're actually looking at the back. But this is something called fringed yellow loosestrife. This is actually not even a flower, but it's quite an attractive plant. The three petal-like things I think are actually colored bracts or sepals. And you see some of the black kind of little stalks emanating from the center, some pointed downward, some pointing upward, actually are stalks that once contained flowers that are long gone. And actually one of them does have a berry on it. And the foliage was turning kind of a yellowish green, I think maybe because it was getting towards the end of the season there. This plant looked to me kind of like Joe Pyeweed, but it was found in the middle of the, kind of the woods with a lot of shade. And it actually does turn out to be Joe Pyeweed, I'm pretty sure. But it's so anemic because of the low light levels compared to what you would see kind of on a roadside where, it's quite bushy and full. This I found along the side of a gravel road with quite a bit of sun. So it was in a bunch of brush. But I didn't recognize it as a bramble. It didn't just jump out at me as to say, hey, this is a berry sort of thing. But it's actually purple flowering raspberry or thimbleberry. And the flowers are quite a magenta. I had to kind of get a little different colored pencil when I got home because I didn't have anything near the right color. And I guess the berries are edible, but they're kind of dry and not really all that palatable. This was rather ubiquitous throughout the woods. It had kind of a very small and inconspicuous white flower that was kind of fringy. The leaves are a little bit more identifiable. They are kind of heart-shaped and coarsely toothed, but it was rather widespread through the woods, and I did find an identification as white snakeroot. I found this in a cluster of maybe 8 plants, 10 plants, kind of at a corner of a trail. And what was interesting about that is the bee activity. And in fact, it looked like the bees were trying to rip their way into the buds before they were even open. There were some spent flowers on the ground. I picked one up. That's the black thing over to the side. And the one guidebook says, yes, the flowers turn black when they dry. This is called the false foxglove. This plant was found on our property, and you can tell because I have marked where all the deer damage is. It's called monkey flower, and it's growing in a very, very wet area. And it's called monkey flower because supposedly the flowers look like the face of a monkey. Whoever came up with that must have been under the influence of something. This flower is southern harebell, and it's very attractive if you get close enough to look at it. It's only about a 1/4 inch long, and they're kind of a nodding, bell-shaped flower with a very pretty kind of purplish color to it. This flower is also attractive if you get close enough to look at it. The flowers are only 1/8 of an inch long or so, and you can tell it's from the pea family. It's bilaterally symmetrical. In other words, if you put a line through a certain spot, you'll see the mirror image on either side. And the colors are really kind of neat. It's got some blue to it, it's got some magenta, and it's got some red on it. And it's tick trefoil, and I'm not sure what species it is, but it is of the pea family. This was towering 6 feet tall at the intersection of a major road behind a guardrail. There's a big tall spike with these yellow flowers on it, and it's got kind of a cross shape on the inside of the flower, and it's common evening primrose. This was found on our property out in the field. It's sweet everlasting. It has a lot of these small white flowers with kind of yellow tinges on the ends of it. There were a lot of ants on it and a painted lady caterpillar, and the stems were woolly. It took me a while to identify this out in the field, but it looked rather distinct. These flowers are pointed down, kind of like the loosestrife was, but they're not showy. They're mostly green, yellowish if you look at them directly from the bottom, hairy stem. I looked this up. It looks like the ragweed that gives people allergies. Once again, this is on our property, down by our creek. You can see where there's deer damage. It's a great lobelia with purplish blue flowers. This flower is like the white snakeroot. It's kind of ubiquitous through the deep woods cover. Instead of having a fringed flower, it has a small aster-like white flower. Stem is kind of a zigzag, and I thought I would be able to find it real easy, but it took me a while to identify it. But it's a white wood aster. I thought I knew what this was, but I was wrong. And actually not a delicate native plant. It's spotted knapweed, which is from Europe, and kind of a weed. It doesn't seem to be invasive or anything, and it is actually kind of attractive. And there's this kind of chartreuse-colored fly that kept flying around it for some reason. This is actually done with watercolor. This is not an herbaceous plant. It's more like a very small tree or very large shrub. And it is mountain sweet pepper bush. It is actually, we're right on the northern edge of its main range, even though it will go up to Pennsylvania. And it has this smooth but peely bark with kind of a cinnamon brownish red sections that peel off. And on the right, you'll see some of the berries, so it's way past the flowering stage, and the berries here are greenish, but there were bunches that were totally black that were dried up. This one isn't herbaceous either, but rather a very large tree. We noticed it because of all the flowering cones on the ground. Some of them were kind of a bright pinkish red, which were very conspicuous, and there were a lot of ones that were more mature and turned black. The leaves were quite long. The one that I copied here was over a foot long and over 6 inches wide. And I believe this is the earleaf or Fraser magnolia. I was kind of surprised. I didn't really know it was quite so widespread, but being able to see the cones and leaves on the ground at this time of year, I was surprised at the number that were out there. That is it. I really enjoyed doing the sketches, and even more so learning what the different flowers were. It was a good learning experience, and I'm really looking forward to getting out this spring when there's a lot more blooming, and that'll definitely keep me busy and probably somewhat overwhelming. Anyways, thank you for watching, and happy nature journaling to you.